I'm finally recording my labor and delivery story with my sweet girl, my second child, Harper. Before I get into this labor and delivery story, I encourage you to click down in the information bar the link to watch my first labor and delivery story with my son Lennox. Totally different labor and deliveries. I won't go into it too in detail in this one again because I've already filmed and uploaded the story for my son, but it's crazy to see how different of a labor you can have from one child to the next. Just as a side note, Harper is now 5 months old. Yes, a lot of time has passed, but I felt like with the second time around, it took me much longer to get back to normal than it did with my son. Harper was born on May 22nd, 2019. She was exactly a week past her due date. A lot led up to that, but so let's start from the very beginning. So about a week before my due date, my family came up, my mother, my brother, and his girlfriend all came up to come around and help out in anticipation for the baby. My father came up as well, like that Friday after my due date, and my dad came the Thursday after my due date. So I was due on a Wednesday, and so my whole family came up. And if I can just be honest with you, that was a terrible idea, for me at least. I know a lot of people, you know, labor and delivery with their whole family around, and they go through the whole, and they go through the whole process, and it's fine. But for me, again, I wanted to have a completely natural childbirth with no interventions. And in order to do that, I really do think you need to have your head in the game, pretty much. So to have all of those people in my house, all of those different personalities, all of the just natural drama that just comes with family, right? Whatever that may be, I found that it was a little bit stressful for me. So I wasn't able to like relax and sink into, you know, the process of having Harper. A couple of days before my due date, I started this horrible, terrible, not cool process that is called prodromal labor. I had never heard of this until Harper. And apparently it is contractions that are real, but it never progresses. So it's not Braxton Hicks, it's completely different. And the difference with prodromal labor is that it usually happens around the same time every day. So every day, middle of the day, I would start having contractions. And I mean real contractions that would get closer and closer together. And then all of a sudden, I would just stop. So the first time that happened, I didn't realize that prodromal labor was ever a thing. So I actually called my doula, and she was like, all right, once your contractions get closer together, then let me know and I'll come over. They, of course, never got closer together. They never progressed. And then the next day, it happened again. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, I keep having these contractions and I'm going nowhere. Like, is it my fault? Is my head not in the game? And to be honest, the prodromal labor honestly had me feeling a little bit defeated, because in that moment when you are timing your contractions and you notice that they're back to back and they're coming consistently, you start to think, yes, this is it. It's game time. Here comes my baby. Like, this is happening. And so that gives you an adrenaline rush and makes you really excited and you know, kind of gets your hopes up just to be let down. So for that to be something that I was completely unaware of that even existed, and to experience that over and over and over, this happened for almost a week straight, it was very disheartening. So I had to really try to keep myself in the right frame of mind. So anyway, it would happen, and I have pictures of all of it. Like, I would literally be in my room. Everybody was downstairs. I was in my room, you know, our bedroom, laboring. And, you know, my husband was taking pictures of me. He thought that this was the thing. I didn't even know he was doing any of that, right? And that's how real the contractions were. I was on my ball. I was doing what I had to do. And then all of a sudden I would look up and they would stop. No more would come. One of the nights when I thought I was actually having real labor, before I knew about the prodromal labor, that was probably that was the first night I went into labor. And I could tell that something was happening. I actually went to my doula's house to go and labor because she lived right by my hospital. So my hospital was in New York City and I now live in New Jersey. We bought a house in Jersey. So we're not far by any means, but I didn't want to risk, like, what if it happens on Monday morning at 8 a.m. and it takes me an hour to get into the city versus the 20 minutes it would normally take me, right? So we went to her house and we started laboring, and honestly, getting to her house and then being there and being in an unfamiliar setting for some reason just took me totally out of it. That was the start of the prodromal labor struggle. So by that point, that was like my first or second time laboring. And after this, we went until about 3 a.m. and then finally it just stopped and disappeared. And so we just got in the car and I went back home. I was crying. I was really upset because you have to understand that my birth with Lennox was so easy. It literally was like, I did not even have to try. Like, my body just got into gear. My mind was in gear. I had everything together, but there was a lot of outstanding factors that I think kept me from being in that same headspace this time around. Knowing that I wanted to have a natural childbirth, I kind of was just letting my body do whatever it was going to do. And the prodromal labor just kind of had me feeling like, well, what can I do to make this, actually kickstart and really go into gear? So, I would walk every day, which I was already doing, but I would walk like longer periods of time, because another thing that was going on with me was that I was past 40 weeks, which for some reason the doctors feel like, that means it's go time. Let's just have this baby. But I don't feel that way. And my OB knew that I was not on board with that. So she let me continue to just figure it out. But she did give me the option of coming in and getting induced. And I said, no, I'm not getting induced. It's not happening. She was like, okay, well, since you're past 40 weeks, you've got all these fibroids in your uterus, some that are very large. I need to check on the baby. And throughout my whole entire pregnancy, I would go to get these ultrasounds, I don't know, maybe once every month or so. And then once we got closer, it was once every 2 weeks or every week. She said, okay, well, you have to go get your 40-week ultrasound and get everything looked at. So I go to the ultrasound. This is after however many days, 2 days of prodromal labor. I go to the 40-week ultrasound, and they are basically telling me, hey, like, I see the tech like really having to look at my stomach, like she's really getting in there and looking. I'm like, what is it that you're looking for that you seem to not be able to find? And she's like, oh, I'm measuring your fluid. Your fluid seems very low. I'm having a hard time finding a pocket that I can measure to justify to say that you have enough fluids. So I'm like, okay, great. So that kind of had me a little bit messed up. And once she said that, I was like, okay, I had to report that back to my doctor. So then I had to go back to the doctor's office, and she's like, look, your fluid's low. By that point, by the time I went back to my doctor, I was 41 weeks. And she was like, your fluid's low. The baby is continuing to grow. We want your placenta to stay healthy. We have to consider the baby. Would you be willing to do, an induction? I was like, well, how low is my fluid really? Like, do I need to do an induction right now, or can I go a little bit longer? She was like, honestly, I would give you another couple of days. And then after that, then you'll have to come in and get induced. Next night, again, I'm having prodromal labor. I pretty much ignore it at this point. Like, I had told myself that until I'm to the point where I can like barely even walk from the pain, I'm ignoring it. The night that my family was leaving, my mother and my brother, everybody came over. My sister came over. We were all hanging out. We were all like kind of eating pizza, laughing, joking, blah, 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 like just having fun. And that next morning, actually, I called my friend Phylicia. She's a doula. I'll leave her information down below. I called her because I know that she just gets me. She's such a just relief to talk to about our kids and childbirth and everything like that in general. So I gave her a call and I just kind of told her what was going on, because we just kind of we were pregnant together with our firsts, and then second time around it was just me. So I called her to kind of give her an update and tell her what was going on. And she was basically like, Al, get out of your head, go relax, calm down, and just remember that your body can pretty much do this on its own. And so I don't know. It was just like those words from her, and then having fun with my family that night, the night before. Like, I was just so much more relaxed that day. So I went, got a pedicure, relaxed, went for a walk. That night around like 10 o'clock, I was having contractions, ignored them. Because like I said, you know, because at that point, I was basically going to ignore my contractions until they were debilitating, pretty much. So I had contractions at 10 o'clock. I was timing them. After about a couple of hours, I started to time them because I was like, okay, these are not going away. All the way up until I went back to sleep around 1 o'clock in the morning. And yeah, sleep. What is that, huh? Right? We don't sleep. Yeah, I know. So I went back to sleep around 1 a.m. And then by 4, the contractions were so bad, they were waking me out of my sleep. I couldn't stay asleep. So I was like, all right, time to get up. Chris was asleep. Lennox was asleep. My dad was asleep. So I came into the baby's room and I started to labor in the baby's room. I did what I had to do. I started tracking my contractions. And then sure enough, they were close together and they were strong. So finally at about 5, I woke up Chris. I said, Chris, we have to go now. My contractions were about 5 minutes apart. They were very strong. And like I could tell it was time to go because as I was throwing on my clothes to get ready to go, I would have to stop in the middle of every contraction. Just completely stop what I was doing. I could not move. So we finally get everything together. Tell Lennox we'll see him later. Give him a kiss. Tell my dad, you know, we'll see him later. He was watching Lennox for a few days for us while we had the baby. Yes, Pop was here with Lennox. So my dad was here to watch the baby, and we got in the car. It was about 6 a.m., which is rush hour in New York City, right? So 6 a.m. and I'm going over the George Washington Bridge, okay? So just imagine what my traffic was looking like. Actually, Chris got us there in like 35 minutes, but it was like a crazy bumpy ride. Like people are honking, we're like dodging cars left and right. I'm bouncing up and down, all while I'm trying to labor in the back seat with my contractions still coming, even though I'm going through all of that. So whatever, we finally get to the hospital. Everything's fine. My contractions are still there. They check me as far as my fluids and everything because they had everything on file about what was going on with me a couple of days prior. So they check me and they say, look, your fluid is really, really, really low. My doctor wasn't there at the moment, but the physician that was there works in the same practice, obviously. And she was so amazing. Like, she completely understood everything that I wanted, but of course wanted to keep everything safe for the baby. Sorry, baby sleepy. So anyway, so that physician was amazing. Like, she was really, really helpful, but she also, you know, kind of made it very clear to me, like, look, your fluid is actually really low. And I mean, literally, I did everything to try to increase it. I was chugging coconut water because that's a little bit more, it's a little bit higher in electrolytes, so it can help replenish your fluids a little bit faster. And I was going through bottles and bottles and bottles of it. And if my fluid was still low, to me, I was just like, okay, fine, whatever. We're going to do what we have to do. And obviously she was coming because my contractions were getting real. After being there for a little while, my contractions started to slow up. Like almost like they weren't happening as fast as they were. And I knew it wasn't prodromal because it was just it was like so real by that point. So I knew it wasn't prodromal, but I also knew that I didn't want to risk a slow up in my progress. So by that point, the doctor came in and she said, look, I'm going to give you another hour. We're going to give you some time to like kind of labor here, walk around in triage, do what you have to do. She was like, since your fluid's low, we can't allow you to leave, because they were going to just let me go home and then labor at home. But she said, because my fluids were low, that I wasn't allowed to leave. Again, I didn't want any interventions, because everything that I've ever read says the more interventions you had, the harder labor is. And it gets more difficult to try to do it on your own, which in my case, I will say is the truth. So after an hour passed, again, nothing really happened. And my doula kept saying, like, I just feel like with the way that you're laboring, the minute your water breaks, that baby is going to be right behind the bag and she's going to come right out. So an hour passes, they break my water. I'm in a delivery room by this point, and they break my water. I have all of my birth preferences lined up. I said the only intervention I'm willing to take is you guys breaking my water. I do not want an epidural. That's just my personal preference. I'm not really big on drugs, and I'm definitely not big on needles. And I did it once, so I was like, I can do it again. The difference is this time, my beautiful baby girl was chilling. She was not trying to come out, okay? So with Harper this time, I had what is called back labor. So not only did I have the normal uterine contraction pain that every woman has when they have a baby, but I also had back labor. And back labor is usually a cause of your baby not being aligned correctly. So instead of being like face up, they're face down, or whichever way that's supposed to go. She was the opposite. So I was back and forth in the tub and the ball on the bed. I was all over the place, like trying to cope with my back labor because it was 10 times worse than my labor with Lennox. Our doula was good because she knows like methods to help you cope with labor. So the way that she helped with the back labor was to essentially like counteract your back pain by pressing on your hips. So between her and Christopher, I had them pressing my hips. It was to the point where I was like, literally, you could snap my back in half. I don't care. Keep pressing. Like, press harder, press harder, press harder. That's what I just kept saying all the time. There was one point where I was like, kind of like, I came to, because when you're laboring, you kind of are in a different headspace. So there was one moment where I was like realizing like what was happening around me, and Chris was pressing my hips and I could see his arms like shaking. Now, and my husband is like, bro, he's strong. Okay. So if he's to the point where he's like shaking like this, then he's putting a lot of pressure on my hips. So if that tells you what my back labor was like, let that be the indicator. Okay. But I did know it was go time this time because, I actually had to puke again. So like something about when you vomit in labor, like that, you know, okay, this is really about to go down now. Like I was close by then. So essentially, my labor in total with Harper was about 12 hours. Is crazy because active labor with Lennox was probably only like 5 or 6. So everybody was telling me like with the second baby, it just kind of like happens. But that did not happen with me in my case, like with Harper at all. I really had to work for it. The pain got so bad at one point that I knew I didn't want an epidural, but I did want some assistance. And the hospital that I delivered at actually has nitrous oxide as an option. So I asked for the nitrous oxide, and my doula was actually like asking the nurse that was in the room. And she was like, oh, if she gets nitrous oxide, will that help with the pain? And I heard the nurse say, not really. And she didn't lie because it really didn't help with the pain. Like nitrous oxide is laughing gas. And it like, if anything, it kind of took me like out of it for a second. And then I came back when the contractions would happen. So you had to use it during the contraction and take it off as soon as your contraction was done. So use it, take it off, use it, take it off. It did not transfer to the baby, obviously, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so that's what I would do. I would have the contraction, breathe in the nitrous oxide, and kind of just like pass out as soon as the contraction stopped and I took it off. And honestly, looking back on it, I really didn't like the way that it made me feel. So if I had that happen again, I probably would not go for that again. I would just keep going the way that I was going because I still felt the pain anyway. Nitrous oxide doesn't actually lessen your pain. It just changes where your head is at, essentially. So I mean, that's cool and all, but it really didn't do anything for me. So if I can offer you ladies any advice, don't bother. It's just an extra charge on your bill that really is not going to do anything. At the point where I was at with the back labor and in my labor in general, it was almost time to push. I think I used it about 6 times before it was time to push. I knew that I was ready to start pushing because literally my body just started doing it for me. Another thing that like you're advised to do is to have as few checks as possible once your water has broken. And so since I had my water broken from the very beginning, I made sure that I didn't get checked very often to see how far I was dilated. So by the time I was taking the nitrous oxide and breathing it in, I think by my third time, my body just started pushing. Like, the baby was there. She was ready to go. So again, I had to wait a little bit longer and not push, even though my body was ready to push, because they said I could have possibly damaged my cervix. So I waited a little bit longer, maybe 2 minutes longer, but it felt like 2 hours because I was so ready to push. And I was literally having to fight the natural urges that my body was giving me, which again is a sign of interventions, right? Because I had an intervention to break my water before essentially my water was ready to be broken. So my cervix wasn't ready yet. The baby wasn't ready yet. It all just kind of spiraled. And that piece of it, I'm not so happy with about my birth story with Harper, but all in all, it really wasn't that bad. The pain was there, but there were no major issues. When she was born, she was like super active, crying, no cord around her neck this time, which I was so happy about because I was worried that my husband may never get to cut a cord. So we did do delayed clamping with Harper, but he did end up cutting her cord. She came out after 3 pushes, super easy. In the end, I ended up like sitting straight up in the bed to push because they were trying to move my cervix. So I was actually in the bed and then like squatting essentially in the bed. I like was held up by the rails and stuff like that and squatting in the bed. And honestly, squatting is like, I guess, one of the best ways that you can push a baby out. And then once I got past that, then they leaned me back a little bit for one last push. She came right out. I did have minimal tearing, but the recovery with Harper was worse than it was with Lennox. Like, I was still able to get up and walk around and move around like right after having her, but I actually had pain with her. Like, I could feel it in my stomach. I could feel it in my like pelvis. I could feel it on my pelvic floor, which is crazy because I didn't have any of that pain with my first, and I would have thought that I would have it the first time around because my body had never done it before. But that's not what happened. So in the delivery, like in the recovery, like the weeks after that, like I was really having to use like those witch hazel pads and having to, take a pain relief medicine every now and then. I didn't take it too often, but like sometimes it was just too bad and the pressure was crazy. And my stomach, I don't know, I need to get my stomach checked to make sure I don't have diastasis recti because my stomach is not right. It's still not right. It does not feel right at all. And so 5 months later, yeah, I'm kind of stubborn, but I'm going to get to the doctor. But nonetheless, I mean, it was still a beautiful birth. It was challenging, but it was still beautiful. Like when she came out and she, was laid on my chest, I was crying. It was just beautiful. My husband was so emotional. I mean, it was just great vibes were in the room. She just came and she went straight to nursing. She was not, missing any meals, as you can tell. I got a little chunky baby this time around. She's still not missing any meals. And I don't know. I mean, Harper is, so we think, at least for right now, how we're planning it, our last child. So, I just wanted to really like be in this experience and live in that moment. And so that's what I did, no matter how painful it was, no matter how much of anything, and don't get me wrong, I had my moments where I thought to myself, I can't do this. And then that's when you need a great support person on your side. And my husband would just constantly reassure me, you got this, you did this once, you're super, you got this. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And then after that, we just banged it out, whether it was, being in the tub and having to have some water run down my back or being on the ball and kind of just circling on the ball in silence. I was told that girls are way harder than boys. So everything with Harper was much more difficult as far as pregnancy and labor and delivery. But I can actually attest to the fact that my second pregnancy was way, way, way harder. My second labor and delivery was way, way, way harder between the constant puking or, whatever. It was much more different than with Lennox. But you know, it's all worth it, because right now Harper is like the chillest baby. She's so happy. She's always smiling. You know, she's great with her nursing. She's great on her milestones. She's like beating milestones to the punch. Like, I don't know, like everything is great with her. So I really have no complaints. I mean, nothing worth having comes easy. So whatever, I worked for it. She's here. She's healthy, and that's really what matters. So that is it for my labor and delivery story with my sweet girl, Harper Sienna. I will leave links to almost everything that I can think of down below that's relevant to this video. I'll also have their Instagram page, because I'm trying to keep my baby content, like where it's just pictures of them, more so on their page, Lennox and Harper on Instagram. And then my page is still family baby stuff, but just like more of life overall. And again, I will be picking up videos on my channel again. So not so much all beauty. It's really going to be just kind of all encompassing, like things that are involved in what my life looks like today, because my life is not full beat chilling with the babies. Okay. That's not what this looks like. So it'll be things like, you know, my breastfeeding essentials and favorite easy clothes to wear that look cute, or, you know, things like that. If there's anything else you want to see, of course, leave it down in the comment section. And I'm happy to take your ideas and run with them. If that's what you want to see, I'm here for it. So I just wanted to leave a little bit of encouragement to all you mamas out there, whether you're pregnant, just had your baby, whatever it may be. Just know that you are enough. What you're doing is amazing. This is not easy work that we are doing, so go easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace. Until then, let's all just keep momming. Say bye-bye. Say I see you later. Say later. And don't forget to subscribe to my mommy's channel. Thumbs up this video and share it.